We all want to have a balanced, harmonious life. What elements do we need in our life in order to feel? What relationships? What types of relationships? And there's specifically 3 different types of relationships that we're going to focus on in this class. Can anyone guess what they might be?
Family, friends, and God.
Okay, so family and friends, I'm going to put into the same sort of category as our relationship with other people.
Okay.
There's a relationship with God, and there's a
relationship with ourselves.
yes, beautiful. Out of interest, which of those do you find that the easiest or the hardest?
Ourselves.
You find it easiest or hardest?
I think probably hardest.
Okay. Anyone wants to speak a little bit more about why that's hard? And there's no right or wrong answers here.
I find in my relationships, like I'll abandon myself. Like I will kind of leave my own needs and like focus on other people's needs.
Thank you. Yeah.
So I agree with you, like I feel the same way.
I think the relationship with God is the hardest.
Okay. Does anyone want to speak something? Anyone else relates to that?
How do I say this? Friends and me are here. God is there. And so it takes more conscious effort to have a relationship with there.
And I want to say something is different people are going to have different
That's
ones.
okay.
And I think also throughout life, it can.
Throughout a day for me.
Like sometimes we struggle with a relationship with ourselves. Anyone
Yeah.
struggles with relationships with other people?
Relationships are not easy.
All day.
Relationships are not easy. Shimon HaTzadik, Shimon the righteous one, he was from the leftovers of the Great Assembly. The Great Assembly was the governing body, so to speak, of the Jewish people, right? They were the leadership of the Jewish community at the time. So he was the one of the last ones, right? Hu haya omer. This is what he used to say. Al shlosha devarim ha'olam omed. The world stands on 3 things: Torah, on Torah, Bial ha'avoda, on service. We don't yet know what that means. You might, I don't know. Bial gemilut chasadim, and on acts of kindness, right? Now, you may turn around to me at this point and say, hold on a second, I thought we were talking about 3 different relationships, right? Why are you suddenly talking about 3 different things? So, a couple of things to know. Shimon HaTzadik was a very righteous person, and what he's saying is that there are 3 things that are sort of the foundation of the world. Now, if you think about, let's say, a stool, it has 3 legs. It's stable. What happens if you take one of those legs off?
You'll probably fall.
It falls. You have a problem. So he's giving us an image here, and he's saying that there's 3 things that are the foundation of the world, right? What are these? These are the Torah. These are service and acts of kindness. Now, what does that have to do with relationships? Any ideas? Each of these 3 is a tool that we can use to develop one of those 3 relationships. And when we use all 3 of those tools and we have all those 3 relationships, that's when we have sort of balance in our life, right? We have that stable stool in our life where we can sit on and we can, that creates that balance in our life. Interestingly, each of these was developed by one of the forefathers. And what does anyone know out of interest? The forefathers, what does it mean that they were our fathers? Just like a parent gives to their child their physical DNA, our forefathers implanted within us spiritual DNA, right? So there were certain things that they developed, certain character traits that they developed that they then passed on to us within our spiritual DNA. Does that mean that let's say the characteristic is kindness, right? Does that mean that all Jews are kind?
No.
No. Okay. So what does it mean that they implanted it within us? They implanted within us the potential for kindness, for example, right? So let's look through all of these 3 different ones, and let's start from Torah. Which relationship do you think Torah helps us develop? Between us and ourselves, between us and other people, between us and God? Which one do you think it primarily helps us develop?
I think Torah, like initially you want to say it connects to God. Is that what you're getting at? I don't think that's the case. I think Torah is actually to help the relationship with self.
Beautiful.
I agree.
Why?
Because it's like, I feel like so much of the Torah is a roadmap. And it gives us like language and ways in which to process and do things in life. Like,
Torah is referred to sometimes as kind of like the mirror to our soul, right? Why? And there's a few reasons why it does it. One of the reasons is because Torah gives us that image of who we can become, right? Sometimes you read something in the Torah, for example, you learn about don't take revenge or don't bear a grudge. And you might think about it and you might think like, wow, that's intense, right? The Torah doesn't want me to take revenge. That's hard enough, but like the Torah doesn't let me even take bear a grudge, right? If you think about what that means, it means that someone's done something wrong to you, and you're like, okay, so I won't take revenge. I'm not going to do the same thing back to you, but I'm not even allowed to feel good about the fact that I'm not taking revenge, right? Because that's bearing a grudge. Now, we can look at it and think, wow, that's intense, right? Like, or that's unreachable, that's overwhelming. Really, what it's kind of showing us is that this is who we can become. It might take a lot of work, but that's the potential of who we can become. And you can see it in any sort of right. For example, stay away from telling, right? Don't tell, not just that we have to be honest, but that we have to stay far away from dishonesty. Again, the Torah is giving us an image of who we can become. That's one way where the Torah is kind of like a mirror to our own soul. The second kind of way it is who's the easiest person to fall?
Ourselves.
Ourselves, right?
Yeah.
You know, if you've ever noticed this or witnessed this happening, right? Two people are having an argument, and one person will say to the other person, "Why are you so angry?" And the other person will say, "I'm not angry."
Yeah.
Who's usually right?
The other person.
The other person, right? And the person who says, "I'm not angry," probably genuinely believes that they're not angry, right? But because we're very subjective, and you know, we can fool ourselves, and they think, "No, I'm not angry, you're just whatever, imagining things." But as an outsider, we look at that and we kind of see that, you know, that person's really angry. And we often can fool ourselves. And Torah, when we study Torah, it holds up a mirror to who we really are and to what our actions really are. For example, you know, a person can think to himself, I think we sort of touched on this last week. We had a question, you know, about, do you look at other people and you think like they're successful, but what am I, right? That we can look at that and be like, am I, you know, it can go either way, right? Someone can walk home at the end of the year and think like, wow, I did fabulously well this year financially. I'm a success, right? I got the promotion, I got the raise, right? I'm a success. Does that necessarily mean that they're a success?
No.
No, if they've neglected their family or neglected their community or neglected their personal growth, the Torah looks at that person and says, and would say, hold on a second, it's great that you did well in your career, but there's more to life than just your career. Did you work on your relationship with yourself? Did you work on your relationship with other people? Did you work on studying Torah? Did you work on mitzvahs? All that is part of it. What's fascinating is the Torah talks about someone who's insulted and doesn't answer back, doesn't retaliate. Is that a good thing?
Yes and no.
For the purposes of this, let's say usually yes, right? We're not talking about self-protection, we're talking about retaliation here, right? You know, take a measure of self-control usually. Is that the type of thing that we would ever find as headline news? It's kind of the thing that no one even kind of cares about. Right, the person themselves, they probably go to sleep that night and if they're thinking about all the good things that they did that thing, they probably wouldn't even necessarily list that. You know what the Torah says about someone like that? The Torah says that someone who's insulted and doesn't answer back, doesn't insult back the other person, is so special that a light shines from that person, right? That God loves that person so incredibly, right? It's not a small thing, because if you've ever been in that situation where you've been tempted to respond to, you know, you're having an argument with someone and they say something to you and you've got the perfect response, right? It takes a lot of self-control to not respond. And when a person does that, that is huge success in Judaism.
But the reason I said yes and no is that like, let's say it's your spouse, that in order for the relationship to grow, at some point you need to say, you know, what you said so-and-so day really hurt me. Like the communication is important.
100%. That's not included in this,
Okay.
right? I think you're 100% right. And I think in the people that are nearest to dearest to us are usually the ones that get it the worst, right? So that in that sort of situation, you know, like you come home and you see like the garbage is overflowing and you're like, oh my gosh, you're like, you know, you're such a mess or whatever it is. You say the natural reaction is to kind of say, really? You think I'm a mess? Like, you know, your socks have been out or whatever, right? That sort of thing, which what does it do? It just escalates the argument, right? To turn around at that person and say, that was hurtful. That's not answering
Okay.
back, right? That, you know, that's
Communicating
communication.
With
yeah.
respect.
Yeah, with respect. Yeah, it's not a retaliation of like, oh, you said something not nice to me, therefore I'm going to say it's like you said something not nice to me. I'm not going to accept that kind of thing. So thank you for bringing that up. I'll give you another example, and maybe this will illustrate the point a little bit. The Torah has that balance, right? For example, there's a mitzvah of not talking bad about other people, right? Not talking lashon hara about other people. So does that mean that you are never allowed to say anything bad about anyone?
No.
You're supposed to say yes. Because let's say someone comes to you and says, Jackie, you know this person, Jack, right? Let's call him Jack. I'd like to employ him. And let's say you happen to know that Jack is someone who is notoriously late, right? And the job demands someone being on time. Does that mean you're not allowed to say? Does it mean you're allowed to say? It depends. It depends, right? Because there's 7 conditions that a person has to fulfill, which because you've got the two mitzvahs. On the one hand, you've got this mitzvah of not talking bad about other people, and you've got another mitzvah, which is ephah, which means you mustn't stand by and allow harm to come to someone else. So if you know information about someone, and it can happen in relationships, right? Let's say you know someone is abusive.
Like a shit or something.
Yeah, someone, and I'm going to use extreme examples just because it brings the point more clearly. You know someone is abusive, right? And then your friend is telling you, hey, I met this great new person, and you know we're going out together or whatever, and you know, are you allowed to say? Well, it depends. Are you allowed to keep quiet? Well, it depends, right? If those 7 conditions are fulfilled, right? The 7 conditions for which it's called toelet, right? For a positive purpose, a constructive purpose. You know, some of those conditions are, for example, you have to know that it's true, right? It can't be hearsay. If you know it because someone told you, because someone told them, you're not allowed to say that, right? It has to be that you're saying it because for the purpose of the person who's doing it, not because you want to take revenge. Right, it has to be that the person who you're going to talk about is not going to suffer more than they should, right? Because if you tell this person, for example, and they're going to destroy this person's life and business more than what they deserve, you're not allowed to say, right? So there's those 7 conditions which are kind of help balance us and help us sort of understand what to do in what situation. Yes, Nina.
Who measures how much?
That is a good question. Let's just say, you know, someone stole $500, and by you telling someone else that they stole $500, they're going to lose their entire reputation, going to have to leave the community. That would not be thing. What would be a just punishment is the person has to pay back the $500, right? So obviously there's a little bit of you know, a judgment call that a person has to make, but it's being mindful of the fact that, you know, what's going to be the impact of the words that I do say, and what's going to be the impact if I don't say. And again, this is what the Torah kind of does, is it gives us that insight into ourselves and our actions, because we can very easily get into that trap, for example, of saying that, like, I have to tell because this person has to know. And really what's motivating me is because I'm mad at that person,
Or
and I want to get back
Or
at
you're
that.
jealous of
Or-
your job.
Yeah, like it's we're human, we're very subjective, right? So that when we study the Torah and we study the laws of the Torah, and it gives us that insight into who we are, what's motivating our actions, whether our actions are correct or incorrect. Any questions, any thoughts, any
Well,
comments?
the only question I have is like, you said that you can't say anything unless you know it to be true. Well, I'm just thinking of an example of my father told me that he lent, I'm not gonna give specifics, but he lent this rabbi $25,000 and the guy never returned it. Well, do I know that to be true because I saw it? No, but my father told me. So the only way you absolutely know it's true is if you were there.
Right. So it's an excellent point, and it comes up a lot, right? So in such a situation, let's just call him Jack again, right? If you
Okay.
don't mind. Jack's the person that borrowed the money
Right.
and never paid it back.
Yeah,
And someone comes and asks you, can Jack wants to borrow money from me. You would not be allowed to say. You would have to say to them, go.
I'll speak to my father.
Yeah. All right. Let's move on to tool number 2. Right. The service of God. What does the service of God refer to? In the temple, we had the spiritual service in the temple. Now that we don't have a temple, it's prayer, right? Which relationship do you think that helps us develop?
Our relationship
Is
is
with
God.
God,
Our relationship with God, yes. Why our relationship with God?
because we're opening a channel of communication.
Beautiful. Yeah, we're opening that channel of communication with God. It builds trust, humility, right? It builds so and connection with God. It builds so much with us
And gratitude.
and gratitude. Beautiful. I don't know if we've discussed this before, but what's the purpose of prayer? God knows what I want. What's the point of praying? God's not
We're
gonna-
asking for his help to help us whatever need or whatever we're asking for. One of the things is we ask for God's help.
Okay, beautiful. Is God really going to change his mind because I pray?
Yes.
Sometimes
Okay,
it builds a relationship between us and God.
yes, and it's interesting because we're actually told that the purpose of prayer is not to change God, but to change us,
Yeah.
right? Tefillah is a reflexive word, a reflexive verb. It literally means to pray upon oneself, right?
I didn't know that.
Yes, it's kind of the same way you say to dress yourself. In Hebrew, the word tefillah is a reflexive verb. It's to pray upon oneself. What does it mean that it's there to change us? How can a person get changed?
You realize what you want. I mean, there's the Shemana Esrei, which is more fixed, but if you're just talking to God, like, hey, what's important to me? It's like journaling in a way. Okay, this is what's going on in my head.
Yeah. It makes you kind of really focus on what is it that I'm praying for and why. Right. I'll give you an example, right? Let's say you're praying to God to win the lottery. Part of the process is you're turning to God and asking God for this thing. Part of the process is an introspection on why is it that I want this thing? What am I going to do if I get this thing? Right? It's there to change us more so than to change God. And it really builds that connection between us and God. Any thoughts, any questions on that? If we want to work on our relationship with God, prayer is a tool through which we do that. Let's move on to the third pillar, the third foundation, acts of loving kindness. So firstly, what sort of acts is included in this?
Listening to someone who's hurting.
Beautiful. Anything else?
Visiting like people in the hospital.
Visiting. Sorry?
It's endless.
It's in. And they all stem from the mitzvah of v'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, right? You have to love others as you love yourself, right? Which again shows us that they're intertwined. The relationship with others is intertwined with our relationship with ourselves, right?
Isn't it?
This is the tool that kind of helps us develop our relationship with other people, because you can stay in focus on your relationship with yourself and focus on your relationship with God. But if you don't actually do the acts of kindness, right, whether it's visiting people or listening to people that are hurt, or tzedakah, or going to a funeral, or whatever it is, right? There's so many different permutations of this mitzvah. then that's how we develop our relationships with other people, by doing these acts of loving kindness. Now, we spoke about the forefathers, each developed one of them, right? So Abraham was, does anyone know what Abraham was renowned for? He was renowned for kindness. And it's interesting is that we see this nowadays, right? So often when there's a crisis in the world, Israel is at the first one to
Yeah,
respond,
right.
right? Where's that coming from? It's coming from here, from this idea that Abraham implanted within the Jewish people this spiritual DNA of chesed, of kindness, and as a result of it, we have that potential, we have that propensity to go and do kindness, and it's within the Jewish community and even outside of the Jewish community, as we see in the world. The service of God, Isaac. What did Isaac give us? Tefillah, and what did he really give us? Is what was the basis of what he gave us when he developed this tool of tefillah, of prayer, is the ability to accept God's will, right? He was so willing to accept God's will that he was willing to sacrifice himself, right? And that ability to be able to kind of say that I want X, Y, Z, but God, I trust that you know what's good for me, is something that we have within us, right? It doesn't mean it's necessarily easy, right? But it's something that we have within us, just like kindness is thinking of others is not always something that's going to come to us first, but we have it within us. And finally, Yaakov, he gave us, what did he give us? Does anyone know what his commitment was? The balance, which comes from his commitment to truth. Right, and that's again something that as Jews we really have, right? We're truth seekers, right? The commitment to Torah study is at its core a commitment to finding out the truth.
Is that Yaakov?
Yes, yes, and each of these is related to each other, right? When we work on one, it impacts the other ones, right? So what does it mean to have a meaningful life, right? Which one of these relationships should we work on if we want to have a meaningful life?
All of them.
Yes, well done. You got it right? All of them, right? And again, these are practical tools that we can take with us, right? Whether it's a commitment to study some Torah weekly, or whether it's a commitment to however often we can, or whether it's commitment to do an act of kindness for someone else. These are practical things that we can do that help us develop our relationship with ourselves, with others, and with God, and which ultimately is what leads us to have a balanced, meaningful life.